There was another interview done, my friends, from the one and only KIWI Talks extraordinaire. Does phenomenal interviews with people from across the games industry. Always just so fascinating because it's people that have worked at some of your favorite studios who have insider insight, knowledge of the inner workings of some of these studios. It removes any sort of like, you know how like sometimes you read a gaming news article and you're like, so they talk to the source, but you never know if you're actually getting like the true representation from the horse's mouth of like what actually was going on, because you don't get to see the original source. You get to hear like the journalist's interpretation of the source's opinion of what happened. This removes it because KIWI Talks actually puts out the interview with the original source so you can actually see what they're saying and how they talk about all of this stuff, and removes any question. Okay. What is interesting about what we're going to look at here is it is an interview with someone named Heather Curlin, who has worked specifically, this is quite the resume, at Naughty Dog and Bethesda Game Studios. I know, going from Naughty Dog to Bethesda Game Studios. And why that's fascinating to me is because they are just about as polar opposite of studios as I can possibly imagine. Like, very different. And you'll hear that from the outset. Like, one studio is known for hyper perfectionism. They're known for insane fidelity and like motion capture quality and cinematic storytelling and all that. And then there's Bethesda. And so it's very, it's very different. It's very different, but it's going to be fascinating to see how this goes. Okay, it's gonna be fascinating. I will catch up on super chats in just a moment. Thank you guys for those. Let's see what this is. Again, this is Heather and KIWI Talks. As always, you should absolutely go and sub to KIWI Talks because the interviews are fantastic. We're not gonna look at like the whole thing. You should absolutely go listen to the whole thing. I just want to show you a couple of snippets from this earlier chunk in the interview, and it's absolutely fascinating. So here we go.
And then did you have to adjust in your head how it works at Bethesda? Because I imagine they're more a quantity over quality sort of thing, whereas Naughty Dog would be would give you the time you need to polish something, right?
Quality over quantity is a very PC way of saying that. Yes, that's Bethesda's focused on quantity over quality. That is a good way of saying that. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
yeah, it's definitely a very similar mindset, I would say, to EA than Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog was definitely an anomaly in that matter. So when I joined Bethesda, I had to get back into that groove of working closely with producers and that studio is very production driven. They have producers over sub-disciplines, and so you know there's a lot of work that you have to do to kind of get your schedule managed by your producer, and there's not really a ton of ownership in your day-to-day. You just kind of get assigned whatever needs to be done, and you tackle that as a task and then mark it when it's done, and then the next one kind of rolls down. And even within the day-to-day of you get assigned a task. If there's a bug or something that comes back with that particular asset, they don't even necessarily reassign it to the artist that originally made it. They just give it to somebody, whoever happens to be available. So you would often be opening up other people's files and going in and trying to figure out what the issue is, and you don't have any familiarity with the way that that person set up that file.
A lot of what you're going to hear in the next few minutes is what we've always kind of suspected, but now directly confirmed from somebody that worked there. So, for example, how Bethesda is structured is that they have producers that manage the tasks, and those producers have effectively a list of things that need to get done, and they track those through programs like Jira, for example. There's others that are used, but task tracking software. And so it might be something like, we need to add in furniture in this building of the map, or we need to go and fix the coding logic for this behavior of this NPC in this quest line or whatever. And they have each of these tasks outlined, and then they get assigned by the producers to somebody on the team. And so, as Heather just alluded to, you'll go through and show up to work one day, find out that this is on your task and you've never touched that thing before, but you gotta work on it. You got to fix it. And so it leads to situations where teams don't have like actual ownership of the things they're doing. Everybody's doing like a little bitty bit something, but nobody is like truly owning specifically what they're doing because everything is split up and splintered so much. And what's fascinating is that this is very, very different. For example, here it is, this. So he gave this talk at DICE, and I need the transcript. There we go. And it was specifically when he talked about ownership.
Gameplay, too difficult here, too hard here. So everyone has sort of, and then some of the people on the team might be introverts versus extroverts. And so some of the disciplines might get more weight than others in different things that they were working on. So, of course, how do you manage this? Well, okay, the game director, right? Got to get in there and make sure that, the voices are heard if someone's an introvert, if the writer isn't speaking up and level designer is, sort of tease it out. If the sort of arc of the character, or we want to set up Songbird to look more empathetic towards the beginning. So spoilers, by the way. If at this point you haven't played, it's too late, right?
Spoilers.
So, spoilers. So if we want to make it that Songbird's more sort of like caring and empathetic to you and your plight, so that she's more believable and trusting, so you don't kind of see that she's kind of behind some of this stuff. Okay, sure. Game director can do that stuff, but at scale. And those of you who've like played the game, just thousands and thousands of design decisions, right? Hundreds per week. It's impossible. So and a game director can be a real big bottleneck. So alignment and ownership. There's a lot going on this page here, and I'll try to. I'm going to take some time with it. So what we did is essentially kind of try to duplicate the game director and empower people to do stuff that the game director would do in different areas. And we kind of had different product areas that we split up, if you will. We had the narrative area, the gameplay area, and World Sandbox, and the art center. We also had some others to deal with specific stuff. And we put a product owner, an area product owner in each one that then would be able to kind of make those calls. Now, the trick, of course, being is that if one area product owner is making a call and it disagrees, like if the narrative product owner wants to make a call about something with the art or the time of day in the scene, and it kind of conflicts with something that maybe the art director has in mind, alignment. Alignment is a key, right? So you're all kind of on the same page and you understand the pillars and the vision and the intention of different areas. So APO makes calls about the, like a game director, and we might know the what's, like the stuff I explained before, but we got to know like the whys, and we got to get together. So how did we resolve this stuff? Well, the kind of tricks of the trade. We got together and we did sort of jams together. We reviewed things together. And then the APOs would go out and do the actual kind of sprint reviews as the tasks get done. The team started to do stuff and deliver stuff. The APOs would make calls and be able to say, okay, approved, and they can move on with their iteration. And hopefully that APO has the kind of gameplay in mind, the art in mind of the narrative. Same thing with World Sandbox, keeping all that stuff in mind. And that was because before those reviews, we would try to get together and do our reviews together. We'd play games to kind of do comparisons and stuff like that. So, because there's thousands of emergent calls, as I was saying all the time. So this formula, like kind of, or it's not on the screen, but yeah. So this setup is aspirational and it's sort of illustrative. We weren't always in this form, but the idea was to kind of distribute ownership, empower people, and make sure that we got aligned.
And what's fascinating about all of this is just after, of course, Cyberpunk 2077, it was clear that there was an organizational issue. There was an issue with how the company was set up that allowed that game to pop out the way that it did. And so what they tried to do was create strike teams, to create a layout where individual teams could focus on areas and they could have ownership of those areas. They can basically specialize in that. So they have a team working on this level. They have a team working on this stuff. They have a programmer assigned to that team. They have art direction, narrative people assigned to that. They have basically a director for that individual little team that is aligning with the game director. But it allows those teams, those mini teams, to go out and work very efficiently and have ownership of what they're doing, which is pretty much the polar opposite to how Bethesda works. Bethesda, it seems, is all about a vast array of developers, and they're all assigned stuff dynamically based on what a team of producers assigns them to do that day. And so instead of individual teams, that are specialized, and you just assign these guys, you're going to do Act 1, you're going to do this scene in Act 2, you guys are going to do this scene in Act 3, and doing it that way. They, at Bethesda, just have an army of developers on the lower level, and then they have an army of producers above them, and then a couple of directors like Emil and some of the other people, and then Todd, of course, at the very, very top. And every time that they're assigning tasks, these guys are just going out, and every day it could be different where they're assigning these people to do different things. So it's super fragmented. as opposed to being individual teams that can truly specialize. The other aspect of this that's also really, really interesting, Naughty Dog's approach is very, very different. So for example, Naughty Dog for years and years didn't have producers. Listen to this.
Control communication, make sure things don't fall through the cracks.
We have no producers at Naughty Dog.
There's so many talented people here that you can rely on and lean on. It makes the game better. And that's really kind of the secret sauce of Naughty Dog, is how collaborative it is.
So they're not showing up, getting assigned something randomly by a producer and working on something they've never worked on before. They have ownership of the thing they're doing, and they specialize in it, and it's obsessive, and they stay and work extra hours to get it done. But again, this is like, it's a fascinating spread where Bethesda, it's all producers, it's extremely task oriented. It's actually structured, as far as I'm aware, very similar to how a lot of software companies just in general work. So like a buddy of mine, he's a software developer for a pretty big manufacturer of PCs and like enterprise software. And all he does is he just works on one tool that's used for, I think it's a debugging tool or something like that. And that's all he does until it's not. And he gets assigned randomly from all over the world to assist on random little crap that he's never touched before. And it's like, hey, we need you to rebuild this database that we have. It's from some team that we work with out of Connecticut, and we just need you guys to rebuild it. You have a week. So they do that. Then they go back to working on their program. Then they get called up. They're like, hey, this team in India needs your support work on this. Can you do this? We have 5 days. Okay. And they go off and they do that. And that seems to be how Bethesda works, is that it's very, very splintered, just randomly. You're assigned to do this, go figure it out, whatever. And then you have CD Projekt Red, which is sort of a hybrid of the two extremes, where they do have assignments, they do have producers and stuff, but they tried to build it around teams that still have ownership of what they're doing. They're given the time and resources to get done what they need to do, but they can still work at a large scale. And then you have Naughty Dog, which has historically, after COVID, they tried to change this, and it seems like they kind of went back on it a bit. But historically, they've had no producers, and it's a very flat organizational structure, where if Janice from animation needs something from the programming team, she just gets up and walks over and asks Tom for what she needs. There's no submitting a ticket with a producer, and then the producer has to find a day to assign that to the IT team. And there's none of that. You just literally get up and go over there and talk to them. What about Pearl Abyss? Pearl Abyss, we don't actually know. They've never done, like, as far as I'm aware, clear documentaries on how they build stuff. But clearly, Pearl Abyss, they're focused on efficiency and pumping stuff out. I don't know how they work, but I would love to know. I'd love to find out. So it's a fascinating spread of extremes and then the balance between. But yeah, doesn't this make precise sense with what you know about Bethesda, to hear that it's kind of just like every day, sure, I'll work on that. Yeah. And it creates a game that feels extremely disjointed and like nobody had true ownership over anything.
And even when I joined, they had multiple exporters. So if you didn't have the right exporter, it became really challenging to export everything out with all the same settings without breaking it. So eventually, and that was part of the like big push that I did there, was to like help streamline some of the workflows so that, the getting an asset to where it's made and then into the engine, that would be simplified and streamlined as much as possible, and continue to improve on that.
So how long did it take you to kind of get into that groove and into that mindset after being at Naughty Dog for so long?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think it was just kind of like a gradual fall into it, but I still think I kind of struggled with it. Although I will say I was in a more unique scenario than I think most of the like artists there at Bethesda. I was specifically hired to put together essentially a layered material pipeline for the artists. So I was one of the only artists or anybody at the studio that had used a layered materials system. That was, it was essentially what we had, something similar to what we had at Naughty Dog. They they knew that they were in the process of rebuilding the renderer for Creation Engine. They were wanting to rebuild all these new systems across gameplay, art, engineering. They were going through and updating the engine.
And then they learned about DLSS 5. Turns out you don't need any of that. You just turn that on. It's great. Don't need to do much of anything. It's fantastic. I can see Todd now. He's like, what? Why are we doing all this? Did you see DLSS 5? Todd, don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. I'm going to say it. All of it? You know what?
All of this just works.
all of it just works, man. All of it just works. Real serious, thank you for that. It sounds like CD Projekt Red system allows ideas to flow up to management more, while Bethesda seems more like ideas flowing down from management thing, which ... tracks. Yeah, I think it's fascinating to me to just see how something as broad as the organizational structure can have such a tangible and significant impact on the end product. Just literally how you have things set up can make or break a project and lead to good ideas being found and discovered and harnessed and harbored and polished up, and ideas being lost and forgotten because nobody has time to offer feedback or brainstorm cool new ideas and concepts because they're just trying to keep up with the producer's schedule, So it's a game of telephone. I think for a lot of studios, it can turn into that. But it also can just turn into busy work and checking off boxes. And we've heard other interviews and other panel discussions with like that one from Will Shen, where he mentioned how as a senior, what was his official title? I think it was senior quest designer. He said he spent a huge amount of his time making tutorials with OBS on how to use the tools. Like the idea that you have a senior like questing designer making tutorials on how to use the creation, that's insane. That's outrageous. But that's it's a testament to the inefficiencies.
So part of my role there was working with I think over the span of time, it was like maybe 15 to 16 engineers that came on and off that particular project. But it was building an entire like layered material system from scratch that all the artists across all art disciplines would end up utilizing, everything from like characters to environments to VFX, and kind of building the foundation for that with engineers, and then working with the leads from each of those sub art departments to make sure that their needs were met and considered while we were building out the foundation for that. So I operated kind of outside of the typical production chain, just because that was this kind of, I don't know, one-off like strike team that existed. And for the longest time, they didn't have a producer working on that strike team, but I still would have to kind of coordinate with like engineering producers to make sure that like if there was some issues or like a new feature that needed to go in at that time was getting scheduled. So I still had to kind of like, even though I may have not been like my role kind of mapped into the typical production chain within the Starfield like production, I still had to kind of work around it. And that was one of the things that they sold me on. They're like, we know it's going to be different coming from Naughty Dog because we heard that you don't have producers, which is crazy.
I just choke on my own throat. We know it's going to be different. We know you're coming from Naughty Dog, and we do things a little different here. I'm sure it was an adjustment. I'm sure. I also, what is so funny to me is that like the people involved in game development that I've talked to, they've always described like producers and the producer team, or producer role rather, as specifically being something that is designed to not just protect the employees from like overwork, but it's also, in theory, supposed to increase efficiency. Like you're supposed to get more done faster and better if you have a healthy production like pipeline, because you can assign tasks more dynamically, get stuff done faster, instead of projects being like left sitting on the side waiting for somebody to see it and grab it. You have people specifically assigning stuff. So in theory, you should be able to get more done faster. What's fascinating is it seems like as Bethesda has grown and utilized producers more and more, it has led to a decrease in efficiency and output, which is fascinating to me. Like, it's just so fascinating how it seems to be achieving the opposite end, which is hilarious. It's so funny.
We're gonna have producers, you're gonna, it'll be a little bit different. So I'm not gonna lie, it was definitely an adjustment for me, but I think it gave me a really good balance of kind of understanding where teams are most effective, like where you can put a little bit of like structure.
Are we still live? Did my power go out? I think we're still live. I think we're on the battery backup. Hold on. Let me see. I can check. Yeah, it looks like the thing tripped, but this means the battery backup is working. Okay. Back to what we were doing. I forgot what I was saying, but yeah, anyway, continuing on. Here we go.
Structure and pressure, but the kind of underlying philosophy being that, developers have autonomy over what they're doing.
What do you find is similar or different between, say, the Creation engine versus the Naughty Dog engine?
This is the question we've all been wondering. We all have passionate feelings about the Creation engine, do we not? Man, I wonder why Todd hates you. As I've always said, it's like, dude, if I found out there was some dude out there with a cardboard cut out of me who lit candles with my face on it, I would also be like, keep him away from me. I would feel the same way. So, there is no doubt. I don't blame him at all. This is weird, but it's fun. I think we all have fun. It's all in good fun, Todd. Praise be. But yes, this is a very valid question, and it's one we've all been wondering. I mean, you are again looking at two of the most, I think a lot of us would assume, polar opposite companies and engines and tool sets in the industry. I mean, we are looking at Naughty Dog, known for amazing cinematic quality and high production value. Oh, this candle's almost done. Look how low it is. And then you have the Creation engine. So this is going to be fascinating. So asking directly, Heather, you've worked with both. What's different? What's the same? How do you compare them?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I mean, Bethesda's engine is specifically created for big open worlds, right? Streaming in lots and lots of data. Unreal Engine initially was not built that way, and they've been trying to add tools and create systems that allow that to happen. And they're still pretty early in their infancy, and they have their issues, right? So like, I think what Unreal is trying to do is add systems that bring it closer to what Bethesda's engine does. But, Bethesda's engine was built from the ground up with that kind of workflow and that type of game in mind, whereas Unreal is, at its core, a shooter engine. So,
Did he ask specifically? I thought he asked about the Naughty Dog's engine, but I guess she's asking, or he asked about Unreal. What is fascinating is that it's true, Bethesda's engine was built for a very particular type of game. And it is true that the Creation engine can do things that many other engines can't do. It can do like physics simulation on hundreds of objects in one space, in one cell that's been loaded in. It can do a lot of stuff, but it's also been built for a very particular type of game, and specifically the Bethesda style open world game that is segmented by load screens. That is what it was built for, which is why people who are like, well, just remove the load screens, just go fully seamless. It just doesn't work that way. It's not built to work that way. And maybe they've been doing overhauls on it since Starfield, listening to the feedback to try and fix that. But it's my understanding, speaking to modders, because I had the privilege of speaking to a number of modders who have tried to do work for Starfield, and they were like, it is what it is. It is what it is. It's like trying to change a marble sculpture into a brass one. Like, it just doesn't work. That's not what it is, so you can't treat it the same way. They're just different, and it is what it is.
From like an architecture standpoint, very, very different. But the Unreal is trying to get closer to that philosophy of like open world games, being able to stream large amounts of data in and out seamlessly. So it's getting there, but it's I would say that Unreal still has quite a ways to go on that side of things. And then Bethesda's, I think their strengths are really where like designers don't need to know how to program. Like they don't have to be programmers. There's just like forms that you fill out that you kind of link together in certain ways that create, you know, functionality that they need. Whereas, you know, if you're even with like any kind of, you know, like node-based scripting language inside of Unreal, you still have to understand logic and understand a lot of different like technical principles in order to like utilize it in a way that isn't going to be cause issues with performance.
It's what I've heard a lot about the creation engine is that it is very approachable. Like the old school like benefit and one of the strengths of Bethesda was that they didn't have a lot of like strictly programmers, strictly quest designers, strictly like engineers. They would just have members of their team. So, you know, they had programmers who were building quests, and they had people building quests that were also building environments. And then they had people doing this that were also doing artwork and animation for the game. So everybody was wearing a bunch of different hats back in like the Oblivion days and Fallout 3 days. And again, it increased collaboration. And that was one of the strengths of the tool set, was that it didn't require you to have dedicated departments to get stuff done. Whereas more, you know, maybe more specialized tool sets might require you to have more know-how specifically for what you want to do.
Yeah, and they make completely different games as well, right? So I can understand why certain things within the engine would be prioritized over other things. Yeah.
And another big one is with modding. So, you know, Unreal
yeah, of course,
is something that like they didn't have that built in from the very, very beginning, but with like Bethesda's, and a part of the reason why they, you know, there was some internal discussion around whether they were going to switch to Unreal or if they were going to like keep. There was a lot of pressure internally to like push to Unreal, especially when like Nanite and Lumen and all these like amazing features were coming out. Like people were like, why don't we just use Unreal? But you know, the real like reason that Bethesda pulls on to Creation Engine is because of all of the like modding capabilities and the entire modding community that's built around those tools and those systems. It would, you know, it would make a whole lot of sense for Bethesda to switch over to any other engine because they've already built up a whole community that sustains, you know, the success of their titles. So, yeah.
They are kind of between a rock and a hard place. I think, like, let's be honest, I think even if they didn't have the modding scene, I still don't think they would change engines. Like, as Heather even alluded to, they have full-time engineers building, like, you know, layered material systems that they didn't have before. Like, they are doing all of this work specifically to try and build out the engine and make it more specialized. And it's true, when you do have your own engine, it is something that separates you. Like, it is. Look at freaking Crimson Desert, dude. Crimson Desert, that is as true to form as a proprietary engine as you can possibly get. There is no other engine on the planet that could run Crimson Desert in the way that it is. It's outrageous. It's super crazy and powerful. And I think that's what Bethesda wants to have with the Creation Engine, is one of those engines where people see it and like, only Bethesda could have made this game. But instead, what kind of happened is now, at least in the wake of Starfield, everything is framed around, only Bethesda could have made this game. It's like any other engine would have been way better. You know, it's kind of achieved the opposite end of what I think their goal was. But that's why, you know, it's been a concern of mine, has just been that I'm worried that Bethesda is not actually listening or absorbing critical feedback. Because at least public facing, everything is always diverted away. Everything's always pivoted away. You express frustration over no Fallout game in 20 years by the time we get the next one, and Todd tells you to suck it up basically and go play Fallout 76. And like, there's never any actual response. Like, hey, a lot of people didn't find Starfield particularly compelling, and Todd's like, well, a lot of people did. A lot of people did love it. It's like, okay, but like, if we can't actually engage with those frustrations and the feedback, like, we're not going to make any progress. So my fear and concern has just been that a lot of the very, very legitimate concerns and problems people have with like the Creation Engine will be cast aside because they'll be dismissed along with the complaints over, like, I don't know, people finding space traversal boring. And it's like, no, like it's 2026, constant load screens. Back then it was 2023, but you know, constant load screens when other open world games don't have that problem. that seems like a hurdle you should overcome. I hope they're listening to that feedback and they're actually like trying to act on it. Because one of the easiest W's they could possibly get with Elder Scrolls 6 is if Todd could get on stage and say, and we've eliminated load screens when going into buildings entirely, even though that should be like the bare minimum, even though that is and has been for like a decade plus for most open world games. That is like assumed. For them, that would be a massive W, because it has not been something they've been able to achieve yet. And I think a lot of the way Todd frames and markets games is around a couple of those big beats, those kind of one-liners that can go viral, that he's very, very good at. And surely he knows that would be such a W if they could get on stage and actually say that. But whether or not, it ends up being something they can actually deliver on, remains to be seen. Rewind gate. Yeah, some people are saying they can rewind. Some people are saying they can't rewind. The DVR button is grayed out for me, so I don't know what's happening. I don't know why it would work for some people and not for others. We've never had that happen before, so I'm not, transparently, I'm not sure what's happening.
Now, you did like an insane crunch on Uncharted Lost Legacy, right?
Yeah, I would say that was probably one of my worst crunches.
How long was it? Or how intense was it?
Well, so that originally was supposed to be a DLC. The way that it was initially pitched was that it was going to be a DLC. And so I think at the time they had mapped like 9 months to finish this DLC. And then at some point, like a bunch of people went on vacation after Uncharted 4 shipped.
Fair. They crunched for like 2 years. Yeah, YouTube's DRM.
The timing here, but a bunch of people went off on vacation. A few of us that didn't take vacation right out of the gate stuck around, and that was including the modeler I worked with on Uncharted and Uncharted Lost Legacy. We decided we wanted to jump right into like building, kind of getting first pick at building something, because we figured, well, we're here, we'll just start building stuff, and we'll get first dibs on whatever level we think is the coolest. And at the time, the game was actually supposed to be like it was pitched to be in China, somewhere in China, and so we started building out all these temples and that were like Chinese temples.
I didn't know that.
Having a lot of fun with like new techniques, new workflows, and just having a good time with it. And then about a month or two in,
sorry, I can't get past that. Lost Legacy in China would have been baller, dude. I wonder if we'll ever see that. I wonder.
They pivoted to having the setting in India. So we're like, all right, well, I guess we're pivoting to a very different look with the temples that we were prototyping out. And so, we kind of ended up losing a couple months off of that schedule because of that pivot. And then once they started realizing that the scope of Lost Legacy was comparable to like the first Uncharted, somewhere between like the first and second Uncharted, they were like, oh, maybe we should be pitching this as like, or like marketing this as like a standalone title. And so that's what they did. They kind of pivoted to, now it's a standalone title, but they didn't extend the deadline significantly to like make up for that. So we were all just like killing ourselves to
why? So it was pitched and originally supposed to be a DLC, grew into a standalone game, but they didn't give them more time. So yeah, you were making a DLC, now make a full game in the same amount of time. It was also, wasn't it only like a year later? I think it was like 2017, wasn't it? Yeah. So it launched August 22nd of 2017, and Uncharted 4 launched May of 2016. So just a bit over a year, they had to throw that together. Of course, they had done some work, I'm sure, before the launch of Uncharted 4, but not a ton. I mean, all hands on deck for Uncharted 4. But that's insane. This is also why, like we've said, it feels like output has plummeted post-COVID. And I genuinely think a lot of it is because a lot of studios, when people started working from home, you couldn't crunch anymore because they're not in the studio. So even if you wanted to crunch with your employees, you just couldn't, because people would just log off and go to bed, like You can't. So once work from home became a standard, crunching was not really feasible anymore. Even if they wanted to, you couldn't really do it. And so efficiency, quote unquote, dropped and plummeted because all of a sudden, you could only get 40 hours a week out of an employee because that's all they were hired to do. Whereas prior to COVID, you could crunch for 80 hours a week with an employee because they're in the studio and you ask them to stay till 10 p.m. And if you don't, like, you're allowed to not stay till 10 p.m., but everyone you work with is staying till 10 and you want to be a team player, don't you? And stuff like that. So I really, really think in the wake of lockdowns and working from home, that's a large reason why a lot of these studios' output plummeted. And it's because crunch had been the normal for so long, but all of a sudden there was this hard reset. And so teams and companies were only able to get 40 hours a week out of employees they previously could get 80 to 100 hours a week out of. So literally, I mean, it would take twice as long to get the same work done.
Would they not do that? Why would they not extend the deadline? Was there a particular reason that they told you?
Well, they did end up extending it by like 5 weeks, I think, at the end. But they don't, they don't tell you until you get right up on it, and then they're like, "Oh, somebody give us, 5 more weeks or whatever," instead of like right out of the gate, like acknowledging that, okay, maybe.
Well, because if you know that you have 5 weeks more, 6 months ahead of time, you're not going to crunch until the last 4 weeks. But if you think you're running out of time, you're going to crunch for 4 weeks. And then at the end of the last week, you find out we got another 5 weeks. So then you get another 5 weeks of crunch out of them. So you just double dip on it. Like, I guarantee you that's part of the reason they do this.
We were thinking about the scope of this incorrectly and we scheduled it incorrectly. Instead, they just kind of let the team assume that it's coming out when they said it's coming out. So we're all like, scrambling. And I had actually like requested time off at the end of that production when it was supposed to end. And it was approved and everything. I had bought the flight and we get right up to the last minute. And I'm like questioning whether I should go on this trip. And, the modeler I was working with and my lead was like, no, just go on the trip. But I felt like I was not in a good spot, like with the work that needed to get done. And so it was just incredibly stressful time when I was like, just like contemplating, like maybe I won't go on the trip. I'll just stay and like, continue cramming on these things. And it's, I came back from that trip and they were like, oh, they moved the date again. They just kept moving the goalpost, and it was, we were like, everybody was stretched so thin on that project, and they had kept typically they'll bring the whole team over to help out with, like, if they have 2 teams working on 2 different products, the team that's coming to the tail end of shipping a game, they'll bring some of the folks from the other game to come over and help out and just like get it over the finish line. But for whatever reason, they didn't do that. They kept the folks that are working on The Last of Us 2 on that project, and they just had everybody continue push forward with Lost Legacy. So that was another thing that I felt contributed to the kind of intense crunch that had happened. They bring over like folks to help out.
It's just so crazy. Like, as far as I'm aware, Naughty Dog is probably the most intense when it comes to crunch, or at least historically has been, that we know of. Because let's be totally real. Like, I have it on very good authority that like Crimson Desert, after launch, we all know they were pumping out updates at a ridiculous pace, right? It was like shocking. I have it on good authority. There were like people sleeping at the studio. Like, when people said that they were like working around the clock, that was not a turn of phrase. Like, they meant people were there working around the clock, like going crazy to get the work done for that game and to get the updates out. And it's interesting because, of course, I've worked in big boy jobs, like when I was in real estate, where crunch was also expected. It was not a creative venture like this, but it was expected that you would be working 18-hour days. Like, that's what it was expected. It was expected that you would also work on the weekends as well. But it was seen as that is the cost of you getting to be here. Like, if you want that seat at that desk, which thousands of people would kill for, you're going to work your ever-loving ass off because this is what it takes to be exceptional. This is what it takes to be the best and to have this opportunity. And they were right that if you walked away, somebody else the next day would come in and take that seat and would work 18 hours and would work on the weekends. And I'm sure it's true of these world-class studios as well. Anybody would kill to have a Naughty Dog game on their resume. And that, especially because if you work on something at Naughty Dog, you're probably going to get nominations for Game of the Year. And, you know, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So I think maybe I've seen people in chat, they compare it to like, it's a very American thing, like a North American thing, crunch. But I've seen it happen with like Eastern devs as well. Like I said, Korea, Chinese devs do it a lot. Japan, it's pretty common, it seems, as well. So maybe it's just that it's very much not a European thing. I don't know, but it is fascinating how varied it can be, because some studios, they don't crunch, they don't worry about it, and it's whatever, and they're just chill, they get it out when they get it out. Other studios, it seems like it's always panic time for months and months on end. Like apparently at Rockstar, they also have had a company culture of a lot of crunch. It's tough to say exactly what it's like because Rockstar is way more secretive than even Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog is secretive, but Rockstar is on another planet when it comes to like how like hush hush and locked down everything is. So we don't know exactly how it works there, but it's understood that those people are crunching and working overtime for years even. So it's just fascinating. I will say I've been to some studios where I don't think crunch is that, I don't think it's a thing. Like, I think, no joke, I don't know this for a fact. I haven't spoken to anybody who works on this particular team, but it seemed pretty cushy. At one point, I was at a studio or at a place for Ubisoft, and they had like all sorts of different teams that work on different stuff there. You know, they've got people working on Assassin's Creed, on Far Cry, on For Honor, on Just Dance, on whatever, like you name it. They just all work on stuff. And it seemed to me like the Just Dance guys, I think they had it pretty chill, because it didn't seem like there was ever like that much hustle. Like I don't I don't think anybody is demanding that the next Just Dance update be revolutionary. Like most of the people playing that are probably like, you know, middle-aged moms and like people that just got back from Jazzercise. Like I don't know the demo, but I don't think it was that crucial that they like crunch and put 90 hours a week in to get the latest update with the Lady Gaga song out. Like it seemed like that was pretty chill. So I think some teams out there are very chill and it's not at all a crunch environment, but there are clearly some teams where that's just the normal. That's the expectation, is that you're going to work your ever-loving ass off, and that's how you get here. They Just Danced. They also, this is apparently a common thing in like northern Canada in office buildings. It's common to like not wear shoes in the office. Like you walk in and you put your boots on the shoe rack, and everybody in the office is just in their socks. I didn't realize that was like a normal thing, but apparently it's a normal thing in northern Canada. I didn't know, but apparently that's normal. I had never heard of it before, but I was like, what is that a thing? And they're like, yeah, no, I used to work across the street, we did it there too. I worked at a bank, and yeah, we did it there. I was like, I can't fathom that in America, but apparently in like some niches of Canada, that's normal. At least that's what they told me. Hayden, thank you for the 10. But isn't it just getting the job done by a deadline? I do that at my job, and sometimes I have to work more than 12 hours for several days to get something done. Pace can be slow first, then bam, go time. Yeah, well, I think the at least to me, the problem comes with whether or not it's moderated. Like crunch happens in every career, in every job. If you want to be exceptional, if you just want to do the 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, there are jobs for you, but you probably are never going to like climb the ladder. You're never going to do anything that's like truly industry leading. Like if you want to be industry leading, you're going to have to work more than the other guys. If you want to compete with the best of the best, you got to compete against the guys that are working 18 hours. You know, that was how it was always framed in real estate too, which was that if you want to truly be exceptional, you have to be more exceptional than the other guy who is willing to work 18 hours and is willing to work on the weekends? How are you going to get more deals than that guy? How are you going to convince his clients that you're a better fit when he works harder than you? How do you do that? And with like game development, I think it's a similar thing where it's like, how are we going to separate ourselves from these other studios? How are we going to do that unless we just work way, 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 way harder to the point where it breaks us? And so I think that there's to me, crunch is just a fact of life. And when you want to work in an industry and be the best in what you do, there's going to be times of crunch. The problem is when crunch goes on for like 6 months straight, when crunch goes on for a year. And because at that point, it's not crunch. You're just being paid for 40 hours, but being asked to work 80. You know, that's when it's not the same. If you're being paid to work 80 hours and you accept those terms, that's fine. Everybody has the right. If I want to take a job where I work 100 hours, like people who work in residence and are in residency becoming like a doctor, they went into that knowing that was the agreement. Nobody's complaining about crunch culture in a hospital, you know, like that. It's just expected that that's what you're going to do. You're going to do like a 12-hour shift and that it's going to be miserable, but that's what you're doing. A buddy of mine is going through that process, working on becoming a surgeon. It's just how it is, but he went into it knowing that that's what he was signing up for. The problem is if you go and you get hired at a studio, you agree to work 40 hours and then they have you work 120 hours. You know, that's a problem.
So yeah, I would say that at least for me personally, was one of my worst crunches, and that's saying something because I certainly crunched really hard on the other projects as well.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, it's great. Thank you for that one. How did toxic workplaces manage to produce better games compared to what we have now? LMAO, crazy times we live in. Crazy how countries with less workers' rights seem to be the guys on top now. I think with a lot of this stuff, it comes down to just pure labor. Like within game development, there is a lot of creative choices. There's a lot of direction choices that lead to a higher quality product, but there's also just functional like labor demands. There's things that require a certain number of hours to get done. And if you're like, if you have 200 people in Maryland or in San Francisco and you have to pay them all a lot in order for them to put in, let's say 5,000 hours worth of work, that team is at a disadvantage compared to the company like a Rockstar, which has 1,600 employees in India that they are paying literal pennies on the dollar to do the same work. Because like with like QA stuff, with brute forcing animations and stuff like that, the team in India is going to do a phenomenal job. There's amazingly talented people there, and they're going to do it way, way cheaper. And you can hire a lot more people. So just raw brute force, the actual like man hours going into a task, can be scaled up way more in those other places where either labor is cheaper or crunch is allowed or both, you know? And so there just becomes this competitive advantage to either being able to work for cheaper or more or both. And that's why I think in the next decade, the real challenge for like Sony first party studios is not going to come from Western studios that are starting to compete more. It's going to come from Eastern studios, from some of these studios that previously have not really competed, because like Pearl Abyss, we saw with Pearl Abyss, they have a team that worked their ass off and are able to build a game bigger than anything Ubisoft or EA or BioWare or any of these other previous kings of open world games. Like they're able to pump something out even bigger and crazier and more mind-blowing, and they can do it faster and more dynamically and cheaper. And there's just, at some point, the math breaks, and that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and I'm assuming here, but when you went on holiday, you couldn't really relax because you were just thinking about the crunch and letting your team down in the back of your mind?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the powerful thing about crunch. Like the companies will always say, well, we don't mandate crunch. You don't have to work 80 hours. But you start to feel bad for your coworkers because you're leaving more stuff on their plate if they don't give up on the crunch. You also believe in the project. You've been working on it for years. You don't want to see it fail. So you want to make sure you hit the deadline and it's good. So there's all this peer pressure. And then there's the other aspect of it too. I've told the story before where like when I was working in real estate, it was understood that the boss, the guy that owned the firm, really genuinely very nice guy. But he would come and around 7 p.m. he would do a walk around the whole building. He'd get up from his desk in his office and he would come and walk through the building slowly, make a little small talk at your desk, and then keep walking. And it was understood that if he went on his 7 o'clock walk around and you were not at your desk, here's a little mental note. I guess Luke doesn't want it as bad as Isaac, who stayed here and is still at his desk, still working, still cold calling. I guess Luke doesn't want it as much, you know? So Luke's allowed to go home to his wife, you know, and his expectant wife who's pregnant. He can do that, sure. But I'll know that he's not as, like, he doesn't want this as much as the other guy. And so it's this thing where, like, if you want to excel and you want to do well, they're not saying you have to stay and work more, but it's going to help. It's going to help. And that's that. All of those kind of dynamics play into this, which is how companies can often get more work out of you without having to pay you more, you know?
Yeah.
You can talk to my spouse about that. She remembers clearly. I was texting.
Yeah. Can you imagine trying to have a family while you're expected to work 80 hours a week or more on a project, and you don't even know when it's going to happen because you might do that for 4 weeks, and then you hit that deadline and they're like, actually, we just got 5 more weeks. Good luck. See you in 5 weeks. And then you got to keep going. Imagine for 2+ months, you're basically never at home.
I was texting the modeler that I worked with just to like check in and see how things are going. Like, you know, and he's like, stop texting. Like, there's nothing you could do right now. Like, just try to enjoy your time. And yeah, so it certainly made it difficult when I was just feeling anxious and felt like I shouldn't be on vacation. I should be there like with the team. So
Yeah. I saw your work on the Shiva Temple on your art station, which looks amazing, by the way. But how do you go about working on stuff like that? I guess you just look at reference footage, like a lot of...
This is genuinely a really fascinating bit where they discuss like how they actually build out assets and stuff. It's genuinely amazing because you may think that all those little things are just like thrown together quickly. Like, no, they manually go and do crazy stuff. One interesting thing with this as well, where did it go? There is a fascinating little tidbit in here about how even within Naughty Dog, a lot of people were not happy about the choice with Joel in The Last of Us Part 2. Again, you should listen to this whole interview. It's fascinating. But this was also another piece that stood out to me that I want to highlight.
Was there any feeling within the studio at the time that Last of Us Part 2 was going to be controversial?
Oh, yeah. yeah. Most of the studio is like, really? You're going to... Well, spoilers, right? Like,
yeah.
Yes. I think the studio is pretty split on like the outcome of what happens. Yes, absolutely. It was controversial internally too. So
I think there was drama. I think there was drama. Shocker. I mean, people always just assume that everybody's on board if it's what's happening at the studio, but no, dude, they love these characters too.
Super chat. For me personally, I guess I just see it different. I work 700 miles away from my family for 14 days at a time, then drive home and get to spend a days off before it starts again.
It's like, sure, but it's my job. Yeah, and I think for me, it's always, there's a gap between, I've seen this before, there's a gap between like what somebody's ideal is and what the reality of life is. And also at the end of the day, I think it's what you agree to. Like my ideal, and I'm sure yours too, Hayden, would be, yeah, I would love it if I got to work 7 miles away from my family instead of 700. And it would be great if I only had to work for a day and you had all the money you needed and you were comfortable and you were doing great, you know? That's the ideal, of course. Sorry, Romeo hears me through the window. And so he's like, Dad, I'm helping, Dad. Sorry. I don't know if you can hear it, but Romeo's barking. But I think that there's the aspect of it where it's like the ideal versus what's realistic. We don't live in an ideal situation, and you probably never will. And so even if our ideal is that you could pump out a masterpiece that is profitable and financially viable, and you could do that working just 30 hours a week, you take Fridays off, and everybody goes on multiple vacations through the year, and you know, you pump it out within 3 years and everybody loves it. It sells 10 million copies and you're all rich. That would be the ideal. It's not reality. So there's always going to be a gap between those two things. And furthermore, it's what you agree to. When you, like, to me, Naughty Dog has always seemed to have this reputation for excessive crunch, but exceptional products. So you go into it knowing that when you go work at Naughty Dog, you're going to crunch, you're going to work your ass off, and you're going to be stretched really thin, but you're going to ship a product that's probably nominated for Game of the Year, that probably, gets amazing financial returns, and you're going to do well for yourself. It's going to look great on your resume. So you kind of know what you're getting going into it. In the same way, if you go work on like an oil rig in the middle of the ocean, you understand it's risky. You're far away from your family. You're doing long days, but you're making good money. Same with like, did you guys ever watch that show, Deadliest Catch? Dude, I love Deadliest Catch. I love Deadliest Catch. Freaking love it. But Deadliest Catch is a great example of people that like go and are miserable for the crabbing season, but they make really good money and then they get out, and they know what they're getting into. Like, I don't think any of those crab fishermen are complaining about crunch. I think they know what they're getting into. And so to a certain extent, if you're an adult and you agree to the terms of engagement at that point, yeah, I mean, you knew what you were getting into. That's just part of the job at that point. So yeah, I think it's always just that balancing act between the two. And it is a difficult balance to strike for sure. I think what's fascinating is in the wake of COVID, pre-COVID, there was never an impetus to force a cleansing of crunch culture in the games industry, at least in the West. And so it was just the norm for a very long time, but it was something people always wondered, can we just get rid of crunch and the industry be healthy? And COVID kind of forced it, because like I said, when people start working from home, you just disconnect at 5 p.m. Like, the peer pressure elements kind of go away. You're already only working with your coworkers remotely, so there's less of that direct pressure. And it also, it forced all sorts of delays on everything, because nobody knew how to work remote in the way that they needed to. So there were all sorts of new processes put in place. So it kind of was a hard reset on a lot of game development. And what's been very, very clear in the last 6 years is that output changes when you shake up the company culture like that. I think Naughty Dog has also expressed that they wanted to get rid of crunch culture. They said that in the Grounded 2 documentary, and they hired producers, which they didn't previously have. They tried to do all of that stuff. But recent reporting from Insider Gaming says that in December, they were crunching again. And they were getting rid of some producers because they needed to get the demo done by the end of December. So they were crunching again. So they kind of went back to how they used to do things. And it's my understanding that internally, some people at Naughty Dog are now expressing that it's just what their company is. It's just the company culture to make the games they want to make. They've realized they just kind of have to do the crunch stuff. It sucks, but they just have realized the experiment of no crunch led to games not getting put out and delays and all sorts of missed deadlines. And so they just decided to kind of return to what they were doing before. So I think, we're getting an adjustment, but more than anything, what's ultimately going to drive these adjustments is going to be the executives and the competition. Because like I said, Eastern studios and some of these really hungry studios out of Korea, out of China, out of Japan, they have no problem crunching and forcing their employees to work 100 hours, and they can pay them way less because of how it works, in a big Chinese game development studio with 3,000 employees. They can work more, harder, faster, and cheaper. And that competition is going to give these teams a real run for their money. And I think that's when they'll start sweating, and Sony's going to start putting stricter deadlines, and that's going to force crunch whether they like it or not. And I think it's all going to come back personally. Again, not my ideal. If I was the God King of gaming, I would not have it work that way, but I'm just saying what I think is probably going to happen in the industry is that it's going to make a full comeback.
But was traveling, and then when I got
I should set this up. This subtitle, I just wanted to show you this one. This is a chapter titled Todd Howard is a Neil Druckmann fanboy. Bet they like to talk about watches.
Did you meet Todd while you were there at all, or no?
Yeah. Todd was
Todd
apparently was supposed to be in my interview, but was traveling, and then when I got
Damn it, Todd. The disrespect is crazy. I'll let it go this time. Damn it, Todd.
back, he ran into me in the hallway and knew who I was, and I was like, "Oh, hi." He's like, said that I don't know, he wanted to go to lunch, so it was like me, my art director, our like senior producer, and Todd all went out to lunch I don't know, after I'd been there for a week. He actually was asking me a lot of questions about what it was like to work with Neil.
You know what this is giving me vibes of? This is like a weirdly deep cut, okay? Sorry, not sorry. Weirdly deep cut. But for some reason, it makes sense to me, okay? It just does. So one thing, again, bear with me because it seems like a stretch, but it makes sense in my brain, okay? Apparently, Michael Jackson was like a huge diehard fan of Britney Spears. Like, it was a problem. Like, he would ask his friends about Britney Spears. He was totally encapsulated by her, found her fascinating, and wanted to know what she was like in person and how they worked together. And so finally, like, they did this performance together. It was like a whole thing. But apparently he was fascinated by her, even though he's Michael freaking Jackson and he is like king of pop, massive. He was totally captivated by her and just fascinated. And so to hear that Todd Howard, who's Todd Howard, is really fascinated about Neil Druckmann, it's just funny because it's like, it's Todd Howard. It's Todd Howard. And Neil, you know, he's relatively new to the industry at this point. You know, he really had a breakout with The Last of Us, and then he did Uncharted 4. I think Heather was working at BGS, you know, on Starfield stuff. So we're probably talking after Lost Legacy, like 2018, 19, 2020, around there. So like pre Last of Us Part 2 even. And so it's just fascinating. It's fascinating. But anyway, going back, Michael Jackson, Britney Spears energy. That's all I'm saying.
He actually was asking me a lot of questions about what it was like to work with Neil. Because I got the sense that he kind of either idolized Neil or wanted to kind of understand his process or something like that. So that was it took me by surprise because I was like, oh, okay. So kind of, I don't know, felt like he was a bit of a fanboy on Neil Druckmann, which was interesting. And then, you know, come to find out that like I don't know if like the Fallout series discussions were happening at that point, but I'm pretty sure that like the HBO show had already shipped or had been announced or something like that. So I think there was a little bit of like,
Giving her the idea.
Maybe it's competition. I'm not sure what it was, but he was just asking a lot of questions of like what it was like working with Neil and you know, what it was like working at Naughty Dog. And then I would run into him occasionally in the halls and he'd ask how things are going with like the layered material system. So yeah, I don't know Neil. I don't know Todd very well, but I did have a few occasions to talk to him. So yeah.
He does seem like a genuinely nice guy. I will say that. Like, we all talk about Todd. He's one of these larger than life personas at this point, but he does seem like a genuinely nice guy. That's one thing I've heard consistently, is that he's a very nice guy. Likes his watches, drives nice cars. You know, he's a very nice guy. But I had never thought about that, but I just thought it was very funny to hear that Todd was potentially like a fanboy of Neil Druckmann. I just thought that was very funny. And again, it gave me those like Michael Jackson hardcore fanboy of Britney Spears vibes. So you know what? I need one of you guys in the Discord to make an edit of this with Michael Jackson chasing Britney Spears. I need you to make that edit, but put Todd's face and then Neil's face. Okay, can we do that? Or is that distasteful? Because Neil would be on Britney Spears' body. I don't want it to seem, that might not work because this whole situation's kind of sexually charged. It's kind of the point of the song. So maybe that doesn't work. But now that I've said it, you guys are gonna do it anyways. So I'm in too deep. Oops. Too late. Anyway, fascinating interview. Again, I highly encourage you go and check out the full thing. KIWI Talks does amazing interviews and it's always fascinating. And there's a lot of interesting tidbits in there about all sorts of different facets of the development process on Starfield, working at Naughty Dog, some intricacies of Neil's writing style, and we might go back and look at some more tidbits of it because it is very interesting. But fascinating interview and very, very good. And again, it just always is interesting to hear directly from somebody that was there their perspective, because you find out little things like Lost Legacy originally being set in China, and then some of the inner workings and behind the scenes stuff that you would not have otherwise heard about. It's always fascinating, and I just love it. I find it so interesting. So there you go.
He took my thing.